One time we had a hill bombed for 12 hours. When it was all over, I walked up, didn't find one of them. Not one stinking body. The smell. You know, that gasoline smell. The whole hill smelled like Streampunk.
From London and San Francisco, this is Streampunk, Episode 2. I'm Dan Orty.
And I'm Ben Howard. On tonight's show, Gaspar Noe comes at us in love.
And it's post-apocalyptic teenage hijinks in Turbo Kid.
If you want to email us at podcast@streampunk.show.
Check out the website at streampunk.show.
Or follow us on Twitter at streampunkshow.
Hey Ben, Episode 2.
Okay, so we managed to make it 2 weeks in a row. It's funny, we got some emails after our first show. People worried that we wouldn't be able to sustain our weekly schedule.
Well, and to be fair, you know, given past form, when we started Mondo 10 years ago, we were weekly for a while. Then we dropped down to every 2 weeks.
Life got in the way.
Well, we had
Dan.
children and things. Then it was once a month. Then you moved, and it was once every few months, and then it ground to a
yeah.
stuttering
But
halt.
the good news is this: is that I think we found a way of making weekly work for us. We found a time zone that works for both San Francisco and London, and I think we're both really excited about being back on a weekly schedule because it allows for a much bigger integration of you guys into the show.
Yep. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to Streampunk. We thought we'd just give you a very quick heads up about what the idea of the show is. In short, Ben and I did a podcast a long time ago called Mondo Movie, and this is very much sort of a spiritual sequel to that, I think, as you termed it, Ben. We're covering much the same types of films, anything off the mainstream. We figure the superhero movies, the big blockbusters, the high-profile directors. We like all that stuff. We watch all that stuff. We're general movie fans. But, you know, that gets covered everywhere. What we like and what we've always been massive fans of is the weird, the peculiar, horror movies, cult movies, exploitation, art house, anything that we think deserves a bigger audience than it's getting. That's what we used to do on Mondo Movie. That's what we're doing on Streampunk. The difference now is, though, that with the ready access that we all have to streaming services like iTunes, Netflix, Amazon, and some of the smaller ones, we can all see the same films at the same sort of time.
As Dan says, accessibility is the key, and we want to make sure that everything we talk about on the show is available on one of those streaming services. But key to the show and key to us doing this show weekly again is being able to, as I said, integrate you guys greater into the show, and feedback from you guys is absolutely critical. We're letting you know in advance what the movies are, and we really want you to send your comments, send your feedback to us. So again, a reminder that you can do that at podcast@streampunk.show. That's our email address, or follow us on Twitter at streampunkshow. And send your thoughts on upcoming movies or on the movies that you've heard us review in previous weeks.
Yep, at the end of each show, we're going to let you know what we're doing on the next 2 shows, so you can go away and watch that. Now, because we're doing this weekly, and because obviously we want the shows to go out on Mondays, and then we'll record each new show in the following days after that, obviously you may not have time to watch the films before we get to the mic again. But don't worry, if you send in feedback on films that we did 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we're still going to read it out. We still want to keep the conversation going about these movies. It's a fluid thing. And talking of fluids, shall we move on to
I was going to throw that segue in there if you didn't.
Well, I got there first.
Make people bright.
Yeah, it makes people bright. It also drives people crazy. A young person without love is like a sparrow without air. Oh, you didn't know you could fly, did you?
That's what I want to do.
It's true. You think I'm joking? I'm serious. I'm fucking serious right now. Look, we live one life. When we're born, we know we're gonna die. And so what's the point? To keep on fighting? For what? There's no hope, because we should just commit suicide. I don't want to say goodbye. Hey, what's the meaning of life?
Love.
Okay, first up tonight, a return of a director whose last film we actually reviewed on our previous podcast, Mondo Movie.
We did the one before that as well, I believe, way back when.
Oh, yes, we did. Yeah, so Irreversible was the movie 2 movies ago, and Enter the Void, his last movie, which Dan and I saw at the London Film Festival quite a few years ago. Love is Gaspar Noé's latest movie, the French-Argentinian director. You know, he is the enfant terrible of contemporary art house, I guess, known for extravagant, outrageous, transgressive stuff that plays with structure, but also deals very graphically with sex and violence, certainly in his previous films. Love is his attempt to, the clue's in the title, tackle love and sex. And really, the key big kind of, I guess, publicity statement for this one was that it's going to be shot in 3D. So, first thing we should say is it's on Netflix, but the version on Netflix is not the 3D version.
No.
I don't even know if Netflix has the ability to stream in 3D. I don't think it does. So, we're reviewing the two-dimensional version of this.
Yep.
It is a story of a relationship. And it opens with a young man called Murphy, who's in a relationship. He's married, he has a young child, and he gets a phone call from an ex-girlfriend's mother saying his ex-girlfriend has gone missing. At that point, we start to get flashbacks, and the majority of the film is told as he has this torrid affair with this erratic girl named Electra, flashing backwards and forwards between his current life, which he finds miserable and wants to escape, and his passionate love affair with this girl Electra. Does that basically summarise it, would you say?
That basically summarises it. I mean, it's a very simple film in terms of its structure. It's exactly that. I mean, the Murphy character spends the entire film standing in his flat thinking back about this intense relationship he had with his ex-girlfriend, how it all went wrong, and how he's ended up in this situation he hates. Now, Love, Gaspar Noé, I'd say, is one of cinema's great kind of sensual directors in the sense that he embraces the sights, the sounds, the smells of humanity. He opens this film as confrontationally as you could possibly imagine if you find the sight of extremely graphic sex confrontational. Basically, it's the Murphy character and Electra manually pleasuring each other for several minutes with kind of very dramatic string score occurring. And from there on, there's a pretty graphic sex scene probably every 10 minutes or so, mostly between Electra and Murphy, but then at one point they introduce a third party into the mix, a girl who's a neighbour, and she becomes the mother of Murphy's child, and this is where it all sort of goes wrong. So it's a very graphic sexual film, and it's also a kind of relationship drama. And as I say, Noe is a director who really embraces sound and sight and just amps them up to a degree that most other directors shy away from. And so for the positives of this film, it really is a kind of some of the most strikingly shot sex scenes you've seen for a very long time. Benoit Debie is his long-term cinematographer, and he shot this film as well. And I would say that the Noé Debie collaboration is it's one of the great sort of DP director collaborations in film. And there's no mistaking when they work together, you are visually going to experience something great and properly cinematic.
It's interesting. Whatever you think of Irreversible or Enter the Void, his previous two films, and I've still not seen his first film, I Stand Alone.
No, me neither.
But those films are, they're transgressive in everywhere. They're transgressive in terms of the graphic content. They're transgressive in terms of the way they use structure, certainly Irreversible. And they're completely outside of the box in terms of the way he uses camera. I mean, Enter the Void is like this psychotropic, metaphysical, crazy tribute to 2001, as well as sort of pornography and all these other kind of crazed influences. And I mean, Enter the Void, I remember, was very high on my number 10 list, my top 10 list that year. I don't remember how high it came.
Well, it was an amazing experience because we saw that on the big screen, didn't we? At the LFF, and it just really blew our minds.
That screening has stayed with me ever since, and it's still imprinted on my brain. So, whatever you think of Gaspar Noé, I think you would never think he would make a boring or safe film. And actually, ultimately, I feel Love was quite a boring and safe film. It's very conventional. You take out the graphic sex, and it's a very conventional story about boy meets girl, girl falls out, and you've seen a lot of these types of characters. I mean, he's not a great, I think, portrayer of characters. I mean, his previous films are not character pieces. They are things that play with cinema in its very sort of essence, structurally and visually. And, you get a very conventional, safe love story with all of the kind of conventional angsty teenage millennial type stuff thrown in there. And the lead character, Murphy, the male character, is a filmmaker and says some of the most utterly pretentious things, leading up to one of the worst pieces of dialogue in recent cinema history, where he claims, "I want to make movies out of blood, sperm, and tears," which made me want to turn the film off at that point. But I was very, very disappointed with it. I mean, I think outside of some of the beautiful camera work and beautiful shots, and it's interesting, the whole film is framed in almost two styles. The sex scenes are almost universally shot above, down onto the bed, and most of the character scenes, a lot of the dialogue scenes, are shot in profile with the characters facing each other.
Yep. Or shot from behind as they walk.
Yeah.
Two shot that way.
Now, we didn't have the benefit of seeing it in 3D, but it seemed quite odd to me, because it seemed like certainly the sex scenes were shot in a way which would appear very, very flat in 3D. And especially if you think about the way Enter the Void looks, in terms of this camera that flies, it flies out of the room, flies down the street through windows. It's above, it's below, it's in and out of characters. He does very little of that, and it feels like, in a way, Enter the Void would have been a much better movie to choose to shoot in 3D.
I sort of agree with that, although I do think, visually and sonically, I think a lot of especially the sex scenes, they did impress me. And yes, he doesn't fling the camera around in the way he did on Enter the Void, but I don't think he intended to. For me, the cumulative power of shooting a lot of these scenes in exactly the same way, and he'll do this thing where he'll flip between 3 different time frames, and he'll have the same characters standing in exactly the same positions, and he'll cut from 2 characters facing each other and then facing each other in the same room but a year later in the same positions. And I really liked all that stuff. I liked the directing style, and I think it was a very deliberate attempt to tone down what he did in Enter the Void, because he was trying to tell a more simple story. However, whether he was thinking this was going to be a radical kind of boundary-pushing film or not, it really doesn't seem like that in 2016. I mean, in the last few years, we've had films like Blue is the Warmest Colour, Nymphomaniac, Stranger by the Lake, 9 Songs, Short Bus, all of these films with graphic sexual content, a lot of the times a lot less safe with that sexual content, mixing up genders and situations. Yes, this was very hetero, very, apart from the threesome scene, very, straight, sexual, monogamous, 2-person sex. And in fact, there's the scene towards the end where she convinces Murphy to have a threesome with a transsexual, and he completely freaks out. I mean, it's quite a funny scene, but he totally freaks out, and it's almost like Noe can't push himself to go that far, because you don't really see the resolution of that scene, and that's actually the least graphic sex scene in the entire film. And a lot of the films I've just mentioned are, like Short Bus and Blue is the Warmest Colour were among my favourite films of those respective years. And it wasn't the sexual content of those films. In fact, in Blue is the Warmest Colour, it's a fairly short scene in a very long film. But those films were kind of joyous in their celebration of sexuality, and the sex in them added to the kind of the fun of watching those films. I mean, Blue is the Warmest Colour isn't all fun, but it absolutely captures what is thrilling and exciting about falling in love when you're a very young person. For all the intensity of the relationship in love, it didn't really seem like they were very happy, and actually it didn't seem like the sex they were having was very much fun. I mean, it's very serious. You know what I mean?
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, and to your point there, it's those films which have pushed the boundaries in terms of what's acceptable in terms of mainstream or even art house film in recent years, combined with the fact that we're very desensitized to graphic sex anyway. And you're right. I think if you're going to do a movie like this, which is about sex between 2 characters, there's 2 things. Firstly, Noe has this clearly weird obsession with the penis, in the sense that all of the sex is very, like, he doesn't seem to give a shit about the women in it. It's all about the guy's dick. And it made me feel uncomfortable after a while, like, not in the sense of why I was seeing all these penises, but like to the extent of like, wow, he's got like a very sort of male-centric, and it's a very odd sort of, I don't know, it felt very, very like We get it, Noe. You don't need to keep showing us this in obviously leading up to the most Noe shot, and pun intended, in the whole movie, and obviously intended to be in 3D.
But that's almost becoming his signature style now, because he does pretty much the same shot in Enter the Void, I think, doesn't he, or something similar?
He does. Well, there's an internal shot.
That's right.
Which he again actually uses that internal shot here. But I think you're right. It would be fine to have these kind of sex scenes if they were a little more joyous, if you cared about the characters. And the characters are not likable anyway. I think it's an inherent problem with casting a movie like this, right? Because you've got to cast two actors, and the two leads are Carl Glusman, who's the guy who plays Murphy, and Aomi Moyuk, who plays Elektra. You've got to cast two actors who can convey a relationship, but you've got to find two actors who are willing to do this much nudity and explicit sexual activity on camera. And obviously, that immediately shrinks the pool of actors you've got to go to. And both actors in this deliver very, very flat performances. I actually think she is the better of the two, and it's actually her first and only film credit on IMDb. Carl Glusman, who's in the next Nicholas Winding Refn movie, Neon Demon, we don't know what role he's got in it, but I just thought he is a charisma vacuum. I mean,
his performance wasn't terrible, but it didn't deliver what it needed to for that character.
Well, most of it he's not having to do very much, but as soon as he's asked to do something, and I'll bring back the "I want to make movies out of blood, sperm, and tears" line, he just looks way out of his depth, and that's the inherent problem: is you've got to cast for the sex scenes, and that immediately restricts who you're going to be able to get for your leads.
It is hilarious how Gaspar Noe loves to put himself in the films. I mean, I've got a great quote from him here. I was going to sort of say this, but then I found this quote and I thought, well, he puts it better than I did. An interviewer asked him whether his father had seen the film, and he said, he didn't like it, and he says, I don't know what he meant. I think he was shocked by the dick coming on the screen. Or maybe I went too far because I used all of my family names for the film. Beside the character called Noe, or Gaspar, because the kid in the film's called Gaspar, even the shaman character had my father's name, Yuyo. Murphy is my mother's family name, and he fucks a girl called Paula in the bathroom, and Paula's the name of my sister.
Yeah.
And that line, Noe's gone on record that 2001's his favourite film, the Murphy character's favourite film. That line about the blood, sperm and tears, I mean, that is clearly Noe's intention on this film. And, I find him a very engaging, amusing character, and he appears in this, of course, in a kind of
Noe, not Murphy. You mean, right?
No, there was nothing amusing or engaging remotely about the Murphy character. But Noe himself, and ultimately, I do. Yes, this film by Noe's standards, I think, was a disappointment. I maybe liked it a little bit more than you because visually and orally it satisfied me, as it were. But yes, perhaps it was a disappointment by the high standards of certainly his previous film. But I'm glad that he was making films like this. The fact he got $3 million to go off and make this film, which hasn't got a chance in hell, I wouldn't have thought of recouping that.
We got a piece of feedback in about Love from Adam Lowe's, one of our listeners. So thanks for sending this, Adam. And he says, in his own pioneering way, Noe reaches for an honest and pure reflection of young passion and romance, while never shying away from the inherent eroticism they project. The film's sex scenes are treated as resolutely commonplace and skillfully woven into the fabric of the film. I can see how Noe's framing device and the sometimes languid flow of the film proved divisive for both critics and audiences, but for me, Love yet again marked Noe out as a fearless artist. It isn't quite as technically accomplished as either Irreversible or Enter the Void, but it proves Noe can branch out, dial it down by his standards, and produce a thoughtful and stimulating entry into the cinema of the uninhibited. I think my biggest problem is that he is a 40-something, maybe 50-something-year-old man trying to do a movie about young romance, and none of the romance rang true for me in the film. And I think, neither of the characters felt very artificial. They felt like... I never ever felt like I wasn't watching the product of an older man's interpretation of young love.
Yeah, and I think better acting could have done that, because Blue is the Warmest Colour was made by a man in his 50s, but because of the amazing performance of the two women in that film, it just felt alive and vibrant, and it didn't remotely feel like it was an old bloke making it. It felt like a slice of life of young teenage love.
Maybe we're not the great artists that we dreamt we were. Maybe this is all just shit.
Maybe I should sleep in my place for a little while.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea.
I feel we are losing time, and I'm not always a good influence for you, and you are not even a really good influence for me.
Yeah, maybe we should take a break.
So next up tonight, we have the very first listener feedback section of Streampunk. We're hoping this is going to be a regular section. It always was on Mondo Movie, and it provided no end of great film recommendations and things to discuss and just general interaction with our audience. We've had one email in, Benjamin. One email.
Who is it from, Dan?
It's from our good friend Stuart Barr. He's a long-time friend of ours, Max Wren on Twitter. He's got an excellent blog at maxwrenblog.wordpress.com. Great writer, and I think we met him through Mondo Movie.
We did, as many
Long.
people who we now consider friends, we met through our original podcast. So
the power of our words. So Stuart's written us an email, which we're going to read out. So he says, great to have you and Ben back podcasting again. I really enjoyed the first episode, despite having seen neither film. Look forward to future shows and hearing some regular strands and in-jokes developing like they did on the old Mondo Movie podcast. I'd love to hear some British films getting the Streampunk treatment. I'd very much recommend The Falling, 71 and Duke of Burgundy as films with Streampunk potential. The Falling has yet to hit the streaming services, but 71 and The Duke of Burgundy are both on Netflix. Thanks, Stuart. Yes,
I haven't seen any of those yet.
I have seen two of them. I've seen 71 and Duke of Burgundy.
I've heard great things about both films.
They're both great. I'd love to talk about them. We should do them. We should schedule them for future shows. 71 in particular. I mean, they're both great, but 71, I think, was very under the radar, I suspect, in the US because it's set in Northern Ireland at the time of the Troubles, and I suspect it had.
It's strange. It actually got a fairly wide theatrical release.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, surprising to me, it was on at my local 3-screen theater, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a political film. It's actually more a Carpenter-esque kind of tense urban thriller, just with the Troubles and Belfast as the backdrop. But it's terrific. Yeah, we should definitely put those on the list. And The Falling, I'd love to see, yes. It's directed by Carol Morley, who's Paul Morley's sister, the music journalist. Yeah, again, got great reviews. Haven't seen it yet, but we should look out for that one.
Yeah, and I mean, Duke of Burgundy I've wanted to see for ages, and I just haven't got around to it as of yet.
Yeah,
but
it's great.
Awesome, great recommendations.
So thanks, Stuart. Yeah, and I think he said he wants some regular strands. Yeah, I think we'll think of doing some stuff. We had stuff like Question of the Week and Movie War on Mondo Movie. I think we need a few extra bits to throw into the mix. We're kind of finding our feet with podcasting again, and but the shows will develop, I think, as the weeks go along, and we'll think of some fun, cool new stuff that we can start very enthusiastically, and then 3 years down the line regret ever
drop.
Yeah,
and we're never ever promising to do a director's commentary ever again. I see someone tagged us with Thing commentary.
Yes, I had 2 or 3 separate tweets today referring to the Thing commentary, which we promised. We had
for those of you who don't know, is an in joke from our previous podcast.
We had a competition, or this long running thing called Movie War, in the last podcast, and the film that won Movie War, we said we'd record a commentary for, and we never did. And people have long memories, and this was probably about 5 years ago or something, but we're still being reminded on an almost weekly basis.
Yeah, Internet 101, never promise anything in a public forum to an audience, because you will be held to it for the rest of your life.
It's a permanent record. Anyway, thanks, Stuart, for your email. And yeah, everyone else, please email us to podcast@streampunk.show. We'd love to get your emails, anything you want to talk about, any recommendations, anything you've seen, and we'll read them out, and that'll be good. Okay, so let's do the next review.
Oh! I'm so happy to see you.
Oh, I brought you something. Brought this back for you.
You're the best.
A reunion. How sweet. I'm real happy for your kids, I am. But unless we all want to end up with that giant fucking blender over there, we need a plan, okay? So listen up. I'm going to take the fat one. He might be strong, but he'll be slow. You take the big guy. Yeah, you're going to have to surprise him. You two take the ugly one, okay? Oh, what's the matter, kid? Are you scared?
Yeah.
Fear is good. Use it as a weapon. Yeah? Girl, what is that thing, a dwarf?
No, that's my gnome stick.
Okay, whatever. I want you to swing as hard as you can at that motherfucker's face, yeah?
Sir, yes, sir!
I guess that was our cue.
Okay, next up tonight is Turbo Kid. which is the latest in what feels like a fairly long line of retro movies. You know, there's been this real trend, particularly in, I guess, led by Grindhouse, to make movies which feel like they belong in another era, particularly the 80s, and the 80s classic era of VHS. And that's exactly what Turbo Kid is. It's a super low budget, post-apocalyptic movie in the vein of, well, actually it blends three things together to my mind. It's Mad Max meets BMX Bandits with early Peter Jackson mixed in.
Yeah.
And it was based on a short film. It's directed by Francois Simard and Anouk Wichel, based on their short movie, and stars Michael Ironside, Munro Chambers, Lawrence LaBeouf. It's set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where everyone rides BMXs. It stars Munro Chambers as the kid, who's a kid who lives scavenging the wasteland, finding bits and pieces to survive off. And he discovers one day a comic called Turbo Rider, and decides he's going to become a superhero to take on the evil Michael Ironside, who plays an evil overlord called Zeus. He teams up with a robot along the way, and action and mayhem commence.
So, Turbo Kid, as Ben says, this is very much in this line of homage to past grindhousey exploitation cult favourites from the 70s and 80s. I suppose apart from the Grindhouse movies, you've had stuff like Hobo with a Shotgun.
In fact, Jason Eisner is an exec producer on this.
Yes, exactly. And it's very much in that kind of, that kind of fake movie trailer sort of world. And all of those films, they have an essential problem, which I've always thought, going back to Grindhouse, which we reviewed on Mondo Movie a long time ago when it came out, is essentially, how do you do that sort of thing successfully when your basic level of production, even on a low-budget film like this, but your basic level of production, acting, direction, all tends to be quite a bit higher than those original films, which in this case is a lot of kind of a very cheap Italian post-apocalyptic movies that made in the wake of Mad Max and Escape from New York, without it seeming like a kind of a cynical piss take. But for the most part, for me, it worked because it's a very affectionate film. And it felt a lot more interested in invoking a kind of nostalgic emotion and memories of childhood than it did in kind of just pointing its finger at stuff and saying, look, that's wacky, or that's funny, or there's something you remember from your childhood. And and don't get me wrong, it's filled with gore and splatter, but at the heart there's actually quite a nice story of a friendship between the kid and this girl who turns out to be a robot, and their friendship and how they survive together in the wasteland. And because of that relationship, for me, it actually really worked quite well. And all the post-apocalyptic trappings that it homages, that Mad Max to the Italian stuff, is all very nicely done. And I like all that. But you can find that in lots of fake trailers out there. But because of this central relationship, I find myself really going along with the film and really enjoying it. Not more than I thought I might, but more than I have done with a lot of films of this ilk.
That's exactly it. I mean, ultimately the film is very charming underneath, and it would be very easy to level at this type of film, that it's just a series of homages to their favourite films strung together. And certainly there are lots of this type of thing that are like that. Even Hobo with a Shotgun, which I actually like a fair amount, it does a good job of replicating the Troma movies from a specific period. It doesn't really add to them. I think that there's two things with this. A, that it has some charming lead performances, and actually the kid and the relationship, as you say, it's believable and likable, and actually harks back more to things like Joe Dante films or even Amblin stuff from the 80s, where it feels like those things like Goonies or Explorers.
Well, that's the thing, exactly, because we keep mentioning post-apocalyptic films, but it is as influenced by things like BMX Bandits or Explorers or Goonies. 80s kid adventure movies equally as important as kind of New Barbarians or any number of these Italian.
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of
in fact,
movies.
it would be a much lesser film if it was just the kind of post-apocalyptic gore-soaked thing. The fact that it sort of mixes these two things together is what makes it so good, I think.
I mean, it's kind of a scrappy film, and I didn't know it was based on a short film until you mentioned it just now. And it kind of feels like that in a way because it has a good setup. The kid and the apple, they kind of meet and they spark it off and they get captured by Zeus. And then, I mean, it doesn't run out of steam because it is engaging all the way through, but it doesn't really have anywhere else for the plot to go. There's a kind of an arm wrestler guy that they team up with who gets a robotic arm, and he's a kind of the good adult character who's with the kids trying to help them. And it kind of, ambles along amiably, I'd say, to a pretty gore-soaked climax. But it doesn't feel dull, and it is only 90 minutes long, and there's a lot of energy, and in a way the kind of rough, scrappy feeling for me kind of worked in its favour.
Well, I think it's that thing of it's not just the charming leads, and actually it's weird. The adult performers or the older performers are actually the weakest in it. The guy with the robotic hand is a very sort of cliche kind of Clint Eastwood styled stranger type character. But I think what does keep it interesting is not just the fact that the leads are very charming, it's the fact that it manages to blend together its range of influences. If it was just a post-apocalyptic thing, the fact that it's extraordinarily gory in places, the fact that it can have bike chases, it does it in a way which is silly and funny and obviously doesn't take itself too seriously, but it gets away with being very likable as a part of it. And next to that, I think it has some very genuinely inventive ideas in there. There's the idea of, and I don't give away too much, but how the Michael Ironside character is creating water or controlling water is a genuinely inventive idea that I've not seen before. There's obviously some really inventive gore scenes towards the end, including a person being chopped in half and their two extremities landing on top of someone else's head and sort of creating this person with four legs. And
that scene was absolutely fantastic. I mean, that was pure Peter Jackson at his best. Just really inventive, prosthetic, old school gore effects, but not just throwing a bunch of guts and limbs around. Doing really clever, hilarious thing with all these severed body parts.
And I thought it looked really impressive for it. I mean, apparently it was like literally zero budget. It's clearly shot in a gravel pit somewhere.
But as all those
a lot of those great Italian movies were. Yeah, there's some really inspired visual moments. There's a moment which sort of sends up the kind of moment of kissing in the rain from countless romantic comedies towards the end, which is inspired and completely genius. And there's definitely enough stuff in here that makes you come away going, okay, that those guys have got something that you want to see more of. A lot of those films are slavish to the point of and that's why I kind of feel burnt out on the retro stuff, is that it's like, well, okay, why are we all continually looking back on stuff? But if you can do it in a way which is charming, engages the audience while doing some inventive visual stuff, then you're going to get away with it.
Definitely, and this is one I really regret not seeing at Fright Fest. It was the second film on at Fright Fest last year, and I couldn't make it down on the opening night. I watched it at home on Netflix and thoroughly enjoyed it, but I think with a festival crowd, this would have gone through the roof, and everything I heard from everyone the next day at Fright Fest said it was just the best film on the opening night.
This has done great at several festivals, including Fantastic Fest, and it is a film that in a way feels like it's been made for a festival audience. This kind of movie plays incredibly well when you've got a crowd of drunken people, right?
Definitely. Well, speaking of which, not that he's a drunken person, but he saw it at Fright Fest on the opening night. My friend CJ Lines, who has got an excellent blog called Ninjas All the Way Down. He is, I think, probably the UK's foremost authority on ninja movies. He writes a blog and he's dedicated to pretty much reviewing seemingly every 2-bit crummy ninja film ever made. So you should check that out. But anyway, CJ loved Turbo Kid, and he sent in a few words, and he said, "What I liked about Turbo Kid was that it got what was great about being a kid growing up in the video era. It felt like it reached into my heart, grabbed my inner child and gave it a hug, saying, it's okay that you spent all those years watching trashy movies instead of climbing trees or playing outside with friends. We did too, and it was rad. It understood why these things were important, not just curios to be ironically ridiculed. It was definitely the sweetest, saddest film I've ever seen that also featured a totem pole of bisected human remains."
I completely agree, and I think it's very easy to be cynical about this stuff. And when I pressed play on Netflix to watch this, I kind of wanted to roll my eyes and be kind of cynical about this, and as I say, kind of groan and moan about this retro trend and why can't we do stuff that looks forward as much as we like looking back. But this looks back in an incredibly affectionate way.
Where are we?
We're on a couch.
Why? How?
You got pretty beat up. You came back to save me. That was really sweet of you. You look pretty good in that suit.
You think so? I just wish I could have done more. I wish I could have been more like the real Turbo Rider.
Yeah, maybe you can't. But you could totally be Turbo Kid.
That's it for show number 2. And before we go, as we did on the previous show, we're going to set up our schedule for the next couple of weeks. So you guys can get ahead of the movies we're going to watch. Hopefully watch them. Send in your feedback to podcast@streampunk.show. So next week we have Goodnight Mommy coming up, which is available on Amazon Prime right now. And Wild City, Ringo Lam's return to cinema, which is over on Netflix. And then the following week we have Black Souls, or An Anime Nere is the Italian name. It's an Italian crime movie that Dan pointed out, right?
Yep. It got good festival reviews last year and it hit Netflix this week, so I thought it was a good one for us to look at.
Great. That will be followed by In the Basement, which is a curious documentary about weird things that people keep in their basements.
Yeah, I know nothing. You suggested
and that's on
this.
Netflix.
I know nothing about it. I'd never even heard of it, but it'll be good to do a documentary.
It looks very strange, and it has a great write-up. So.
Yeah. Good. All right, so that's the schedule for the next 2 weeks. Other than that, just follow us on Twitter @Streampunk Show, email us to podcast@streampunk.show, or check out our website at streampunk.show.
We'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye.